What up, nerds? It's Mason, back with part 2 of my top 20 favorite albums of all time. In this video, we'll be finishing up, counting down from number 10 to number 1. Thanks a lot for checking me out. In my previous video, I meant to explain a little bit more of how I rank these albums, the ways I used to judge them. Basically, I judge them as an album as a whole. Can I listen to the whole album from start to finish without needing to skip any songs? How well does it listen in that aspect? How frequently do I listen to these albums? Some of these I only listen to once in a while, or I have to be in the right mood. Others I could listen to at just about any time and still really enjoy it. What's the nostalgic factor? I get high on nostalgia all the time. I'm a nostalgia junkie. A lot of these albums came out around the time that I was growing up, becoming a teenager, and I feel like for most people that's when music starts to really sink in and kind of affect you as a person. At least it did for me. So a lot of these albums came out around that time, and that's why they mean the most to me. And then, of course, what kind of emotional response does the album give me? How much does it inspire me? We'll start out with number 10. You guys know it. I know some of you do. All right. This is Brand New with their album The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me. This is their first album on a major record label, but it is their third studio album. Brand New means a whole lot to me. Their first couple albums were great. This one really stands out because it's not attuned to the breakup lyrics and styles of their previous albums, and a lot of bands around that time kind of had the same style. And while those songs still were very relatable at that time, this album is a lot different in the fact that they matured. They have a lot deeper things to say. This album was released in 2006, so I was a sophomore in high school. I remember the day that it came out. I remember going to get it the day that it came out. It meant a lot to me. And even though, as I said, they changed a lot as a band with this album, I always felt like it wasn't a surprise. When you listen to it, you kind of feel like they're the kind of band that was always capable of writing great music like this. When I was reading some facts about this album, one thing that stood out to me was someone called it the dark side of the moon, but for emo. So they compared it to Pink Floyd, and I really like that. I'd agree with that. Also, I've always really enjoyed this album cover. Definitely one of my favorite album covers of all time. I remember when this came out and it was still heavily available in record stores, Walmart, Target, wherever. Whenever I'd see it, you'd search and it'd be in the B's, tucked away. I'd always pull out any copies and I'd stick them in front of the more popular CDs that were on display. That was just always my thing. I loved it so much. I wanted everyone to be able to see it and see like, oh, what's this weird obscure album? Maybe I should check that out. I don't know if it ever worked, but I always did it. It kind of gives like a heavy metal vibe, I think, but it's not heavy metal at all. Brand New, they're just indie rock, alternative rock guys doing their own thing. I feel like while they're kind of underknown, they still sell out all their concerts, and so they are well known, but they're not, I don't know. They're just, they're not on the radio or anything usually, but if you know them, you know them well, and they do have a huge cult following. I was lucky enough to see them live once. Lots of great references in this album, references to Stephen King, The Godfather, mainstream religion, and even a tragic song about the death of a 7-year-old girl when she was hit by a drunk driver and she was decapitated. I think the song Limousine was written after that. I would probably name this album my favorite album that came out while I was in high school. Meant a lot to me then, still obviously means a lot to me now. It's hard to listen to these songs individually. Usually it's a mood thing for me, and I like to listen to the album as a whole more than just the songs themselves. And it's hard to pick a favorite track, but I would go with Luca. Oh yeah. All right, number 9, I picked A Perfect Circle. This is their album 13th Step. This came out in 2003. It's probably the only concept album on my list. Being called a 13th step, it has to do with the 12 steps, the 12-step addiction program. So lots of these songs obviously deal with addiction, but not just stereotypical drug addiction. Different perspectives on addiction, the perspective of the addict, the dealer, the drugs themselves perhaps, whatever they may be. The song The Outsider is about a friend of a person who is suicidal, and they don't really understand what they're going through. They're kind of insensitive about it. So that's another aspect of drug addiction, is maybe friends who can't relate. Just an atmospheric, beautiful album, calming, enlightening. What would you expect from a band like A Perfect Circle? Really love their previous album, but this one always stands out to me. Love listening to it, alone in the dark, kind of an album. Road trips too, it's always good for that. Love Maynard's voice, of course, and the whole band brings it together really well. My favorite song would probably be The Noose. I'll never forget when I first heard that song. Very powerful. Closely followed by The Nurse Who Loved Me, which is a cover song. Number 8. Alright, I picked The Matches. This is their album, Yvonne Dahl, Killed the Locals. This album was released in 2004. The album title, as you can see, the letter E, Von Dahl, Killed the Locals, refers to a legal battle that the band had with a woman named Yvonne Dahl, who forced them to change their original band name, which was The Locals. So forced them to change their name from The Locals to The Matches. And I guess that inspired their album title. When it comes to this album, this was like one of the first albums I heard in full when I was really getting into punky stuff. So it's always really stood out to me. It's kind of poppy, and fun, but they got a lot of great tracks on here. They definitely have the right punk attitude for my tastes. Just a group of fun guys writing fun songs. Love putting this album on when I want to have some fun, lighten the mood, get energetic. Just tons of fun songs on here. It'll always be one of my favorites. And to pick a favorite, I would have to go with the kind of the untitled, scratched out song. That one always sticks out. Love The Matches. All right, we got number 7. Who doesn't have this one on their list, guys? Oh yeah, we got Nirvana's Nevermind. I would expect that this is on like 99% of anybody's list, just depending on where it goes, but it's not on your top 20 list. I don't know what you're doing. It's really hard to say anything that hasn't already been said about this magical, godlike, legendary album, iconic album. What? Come on, man. I could just hold it up and you guys know exactly what I'm saying. This album came out in 1992, or 91, I'm sorry. I think that it's one of those reverse mainstream albums. Obviously it's very mainstream, everybody knows about it, but I feel like the whole philosophy of it, and perhaps of the band, even though I do believe that he wanted to write songs that were popular. I think, it might inspire debate with some people on what his Kurt Cobain's line of thinking was when it comes to being a rock star. But it's like one of those albums that's so popular, but it also was inspired by the unpopular. It's hard to say what I'm trying to say when it comes to that, and when it comes to most popular punk albums. It's not meant to be like people that aren't already with it, they're gonna hear it on the radio and they're gonna like it because they're catchy songs, but are they really in tune with the deeper philosophies is questionable. And if they're not, I guess albums like these can educate and inspire in that way. Hopefully I made sense there. I really want to. But anyway, but back to this album in general, like everybody knows the hits, you know, Smells Like Teen Spirit and all that stuff. But when was the last time you gave the whole album a listen? You know, the songs that you don't hear on the radio every 5 seconds, because it really is a perfect album. And I remember, you know, listening to it when I was doing my list, and just every track, it just reminded me, like, oh, man, this, I forgot about this song. This song was great. The song's, you know, almost better than the ones on the radio. It's just a perfect album. And even though, you know, I just went off about the songs that aren't on the radio, I guess I'd still have to pick my favorite is In Bloom. So yeah, Nirvana, baby. All right, number 6. I picked Sublime's 40 Ounces to Freedom. Yes, sir. Party on. Punk rock. This album was released in 1992, and it is their debut album, even though they released a little EP called Ja Don't Pay the Bills or something like that before this one, but this was their first like full length. Something that was cool I read about this album was that they actually kind of recorded this album secretly, maybe a little illegally, at California State University. They knew a student that went there, and the student would sneak them in late at night to record in the studio. So that was cool, and that's punk, man. Love Sublime is just, they're just party songs, social songs, punk roots. I'd probably give Sublime and Bradley Nowell the award for the band that I like, that inspires me to sing along with them. You know, if I feel like singing along, it's usually Sublime is my favorite album or band to sing along with. Definitely one of the best albums to put on if you're having a social gathering, or if, you know, you're driving around with some friends. So yeah, it's Sublime. Had to be on my list. Always loved Sublime. Punk rock changed our lives. For my favorite song, Let's Go Get Stoned, bro. Coming down to number 5. Oh yeah, I love this one, guys. Love it so much. Here it is. We got Mindless Self-Indulgence with Frankenstein Girls Will Seem Strangely Sexy. Great album title. This album was released in 2000. And what's cool about the album cover or album art is it's the same artist that did Tank Girl and the artist for the band The Gorillaz. So if it looked familiar, it's the same artist. Fun thing about this album is all the asterisks. It's meant to bleep out, you know, words. Obviously we know what it means, but it bleeps out words that don't even need to be bleeped out. So it's kind of funny in that aspect. I'm sure they're just poking fun at censorship. What was also cool about this, and shamefully, like, I really didn't even realize this until I read about it, and it was pointed out to me, like, all the songs are in alphabetical order. I mean, that's, you know, big deal, but it's just something funny that I never noticed about one of my all-time favorite albums. But that's funny. Lots of tracks, you know, some are pretty short. Just, goddamn it, just such a fun, unique, original album by a fun and unique original band. You can't put them in a genre. You know, it's obviously rock and roll, and they got guitars and shit and drums, but there's also techno, lots of electronic, and just a whole bunch of different vibes. I think Little Jimmy Urine, the singer, once classified them as jungle pussy punk. Something like that was the genre that he gave it, which I thought was funny. I hope that when I'm 80 years old, I'm still fucking listening to this album. I love Mindless Self-Indulgence so much. This album is so fun, guys. I'm gonna say it again. Fun album. I can listen to it anytime and have fun with it. It always cheers me up. These guys. To pick a favorite song, let's go with the classic, Dicks Are For My Friends. Hell yeah. All right, we're on to number 4, and I picked The Killers with their album Hot Fuss. This album has seen better days. I've had it for a long time. This was released in 2004, and it is the debut album from The Killers. You know, it was one of my first favorite CDs. Obviously, Mr. Brightside was a big hit, and you know, it just latched on with me, and loved the whole thing. It has just always maintained its reputation as a classic for me. It used to be my #1 favorite CD. You know, it's not full of attitude, it's not hardcore, it's not loud metal, you know, like some of the other stuff I like. Just nice, classic, you know, alternative rock. A very talented band, really simple but great songs. My favorite track is Smile Like You Mean It, and I would probably name that song maybe my top 5 songs of all time, at least top 10. Like, I just love that song. Brilliant song, nostalgic song. Love putting this album on when I need a nice dose of happy nostalgia, of reminiscing of times past. So it'll always stand out to me. So yeah, Killers, Hot Fuss. All right, number 3, final 3, guys. All right, let's get it rocking. I picked It's Slipknot's back, guys. I wasn't done with Slipknot, so we got Slipknot. This is their album, Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses. Obviously, their third full-length album, which was released in 2004. So yeah, Slipknot will be the only band on my list to appear twice. Let's see, their song Before I Forget won the Grammy Award for Best Metal Performance. I liked a quote by Sean Clown from the band where he said, the first album was fun, the second album felt like we were saying, fuck you, we're dying here, and the third was the healing process. So that stood out to me. I thought that it rang true for me. Obviously, you know, the first album was higher up on my list, really loved it. Iowa was a great album, just not as a whole. You know, there are some tracks that didn't fit in as well for me, but still a great album. Shit, I don't want to talk shit about it. But with Volume 3 all the way through, always meant a lot to me. And this was the CD that came out when I was really starting to get into the band, so it influenced me pretty heavily. I used to fall asleep listening to this album, and not to mean that in a bad way. Like, even though it's loud and it's metal, this album, and really Slipknot in general, has a weird calming effect on me sometimes. It's almost like the emotion, or the heavy emotion inside of you, is kind of released through the music, and you don't have to express it in negative ways. You know, you just listen to music like this, and it kind of does it for you, if that makes sense. So yeah, obviously, you know, third favorite album of all time. Love it all the way through. Love the way the band, you know, I don't want to say they softened at all. You know, I don't want to mistake softness for just maturation. And, you know, it was a little bit more melodic. They use acoustic for the first time in this album. Just a little bit more emotional than just making noise. So I appreciate the album for that and for what it says about the band. Love the album, and my favorite track would be 3-0. But when it also comes to Slipknot, you know, this is my favorite one, but what I really listen to in the car all the time is Slipknot 9.0 Live. And I don't like a lot of live tracks, live albums, remixes. I usually tend to prefer original songs, but this is the exception. Great album if you just want to get pumped up. So for a live album, that's fucking damn good. Love the way you almost feel like you're at a show when you listen to this album. The way that Corey addresses the audience and stuff like that. The way they use their songs in different ways at shows to really get the crowd involved. Always very inspiring to listen to. All right, number 2. All right. Have I not been punk enough for you guys? Well, I chose Misfits, Walk Among Us, as my number 2 pick. This is the earliest album on my list, which was released in 1982. So the only album older than I am. This was the Misfits' first full-length album, which was behind shorter albums like Static Age and 12 Hits from Hell. When I first heard the Misfits, it's pretty strange to me, but not off-putting. I always kind of describe them as perhaps an acquired taste. It just depends on who you are. One of my favorite books in high school was a book called Hairstyles of the Damned, and I remember the way the main character described the Misfits and the way that he discovered the Misfits really inspired me, and that's kind of how I got into the Misfits in a way, was because of that book, and it really latched on to me. And it's almost like talking about MSI. I can always put this album on, always listen to the Misfits, and it just makes me feel better. I mean, they are considered a pretty classic punk rock band, more of a horror punk. They do have their own thing. It's not like, crazy politically charged like some of the punk rock back then. They just have their own attitude, their own style, very original, especially at that time. Iconic band, everybody can recognize the ghost face symbol, whether they really know what it means or not. It's just an iconic symbol in music culture. If I had to pick 3 albums to take with me on a deserted island, this would be on the list, along with Sublime, and then of course my first album coming up. But yeah, can't say enough great fucking things about the Misfits. And usually though, if I'm in the car, this is the one that's 90% of the time in my CD player ready to go. So kind of the re-release, remastered version, but with more tracks on it anyway. But as an album, love it. Favorite song, Skulls. So yeah, what's my first favorite album? Those that know me will probably guess. But anyway, at number 1, it's Tool with Lateralis. Yes, we'll slip it out here. It's just beautiful. It's just like, what's that? What kind of music is that? It's God music. Truly. See, it's not in there because that one's in my CD player right now, actually. Anyway, Lateralis came out in 2001, and they won the Grammy for Best Metal Performance for the song Schism. Lord, this album just has everything I would want in an album. That the band has like everything I would want from a band. It's truly inspiring, almost above your head, even though it's kind of like perhaps going back to reverse mainstream. Very popular, but how many people can really take it to heart? How many people does it really teach other than just entertain? Tool doesn't make stinker albums. This is just the one that stands out the most to me. I really love Anima, but this one I'm just more familiar with, so that's why I got my top choice. Even the music videos stand out a lot to me as well. That's kind of where my enjoyment of the band originated. In the late 90s, I'll never forget seeing the video for Stink Fist, which isn't on this album, but still. It was kind of like you watched it and the music was so powerful and it went along very strangely with what the video portrayals. It's almost like the videos are kind of gruesome, kind of horror themed, weird, scary, but the music is kind of calming and I don't want to say opposite, but just weirdly juxtaposed, if that makes sense. But in hindsight, goes very well together when you research it and tend to discover meanings for yourself, which is a lot of what Tool does for people, or perhaps hopes to do. It's discovering things within yourself through music. But yeah, those videos are some of the best videos ever, of course, with great designs and concept from Adam Jones and other artists. But it was like, you know, the video would end and you're just kind of like, what did I just watch? That was weird. And that's Tool, man. Got to see them live back in May, right across the street from where I live, if you can believe that. Great show, just visually stunning. Maynard James Keenan is definitely my favorite singer. His voice is just, where did this voice come from? It's just so soft and melodic, but can also be powerful, and, you know, has its own metal vibes as well. He can really get loud as well as soft. But without going on and on about it the way that I really could, just #1 favorite album always. I mean, I guess we'll see, but this one stands the test of time, I'm sure. They got a brand new album coming out August 30th, so we'll see what's up with that. Other than that, weird alien album, Tool, man. Know thyself. So that's my albums. You know, it might not be classic rock enough. You know, maybe, you know, I don't go back far enough for you guys. I don't know. I love this stuff from back in the day too. It's just not on my top 20. There's more albums than 20 albums out there. I love a lot of shit. You know, there might not be too much classic punk or anything like that, but it's me enough. I'm really happy with my list. Happy for you guys to check me out. Again, give me shouts out in the comments about what kind of albums you guys like. Any of these appeal to you guys. So yeah, rock on, man. Punk's not dead.